Hi, on this little mini tutorial I'm going to show you how I start and stop my threads. When I was quilting this piece I ran out of bobbin thread, and now I put a new bobbin in and I have to bring up my bobbin thread and start stitching. I'm going to bring my machine over, line my hopping foot up about a half an inch away from where I ended, and you can see how I brought my threads up here. Now I like to start with my needle down, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to swing it over to, what would that be, the right side. Get my fingers out of the way. I'm going to make another stitch, bring the machine over just a hair, do another little stitch right there, and what I'm doing is I'm actually locking those threads because I don't bury my threads. And then once I do that 2, possibly 3 times depending on how much wear the quilt is going to get, then I'm going to continue quilting. And I will overlap my stitching line slightly there. Before I clip my threads and begin quilting along, I like to treat my threads a little bit differently than most people do. A lot of people bury their threads. I don't. I use a product called Fray Check. Prior to becoming a quilter, I was a professional seamstress, and we used a lot of Fray Check in the garments. And what I do is I take it from the regular Fray Check bottle and I put it in a little needle nose bottle like this, which has a nice fine point on it, so that when I take this little rubber stopper off, I can come in here and I can put just the teeniest tiniest drop of Fray Check right on my start and stop. And once I have that Fray Check on there, I'm now going to come in and just clip my threads. Now this looks a little nasty right now, mainly because I have dark threads on a light fabric, but once it dries, and of course the threads are a little bit dark because it does have the liquid Fray Check on there, but the right Fray Check will dry clear and it just secures the area a little bit. The other thing I do is I'm using a stitch length regulated machine, and I have my stitch length set to about 10 stitches per inch, which is, I feel, a really good size stitch. It's really stable, it holds in really well, and at 10 stitches per inch it's really kind of hard to pick those stitches out. So if I have a hard time picking the stitches out at 10 stitches per inch, I figure that the stitches themselves are going to have a little bit harder time coming out at 10 stitches per inch. Using Fray Check can sometimes be a little controversial to many quilters, but you have to make the choice yourself of whether you want to use it or not. I have used it on virtually every quilt that I have quilted. I have had several of my quilts win national and local awards. Those quilts all had Fray Check on it, and not one time did I ever have a judge mention it. Now, one thing that will sometimes happen with Fray Check is that if you're working on very dark, very pure colors, say like solid black, solid navy, blue, sometimes the Fray Check, when it dries, will leave a little white ring around where it was applied. If I have a fabric like that, I'll use my applicator bottle. Instead of putting a blob on, I'll just kind of gently apply the Fray Check along the seam line. If the Fray Check dries with a little bit of a ring around it, by applying it to the line of stitching, it's going to look like a shadow from the stitching. But that's just something to be aware of. It doesn't happen very often. It doesn't happen with every dark fabric, but you may want to check your fabric before you start using Fray Check all over the fabric, especially if it's dark, solid colors. But if the color is a print, if it's a light color, I have not had any problem over probably close to the 30-some years that I have been using this product. I'm at the end of a line of stitching, and what I want to do is lift my needle up. I'm going to move my machine away from me. Then I'm going to lift up on my top thread, and if you notice, there is a blob of thread right there. Okay, that's your bobbin thread. So if you take your little snips, and I'm going to clip right through the middle of that blob, right next to my fabric, and at this point I have clipped my bobbin thread the same time that I clip my top thread, and this will save you a ton of time. I don't bury my threads, but what I do is I will take some Fray Check in my little tiny needle nose applicator bottle. I'll put a little dab of Fray Check right on my end, and that's all I do to secure my threads.